we're going to start in 5 minutes. 4 minutes and a half now.
They have it on Amazon, but it costs like 4 times as much as in Germany. I think for 3,000. I'm just explaining
That's why we start and then we will take it. You start and we will look at which one of the two of these hospitals. So you're really waiting it. So which one of you wants to keep it? Yeah, this one is the easy one. Okay, you want this one. Okay, you keep it like this, on your chin, okay? Otherwise we don't hear, especially okay? Go for it whenever you're ready. It's on?
Is on?
So, good morning everyone.
And welcome to this next session of Dreamweaving presentations. We're starting with a brief introduction by David and Mona to the Dreamweaving process and going through everything again. Then we will have a presentation by Omar on city form and bioclimatic design. After that, we will go into a tea break, and then we will have a presentation on urban planning and Oroville economic ideals by Nicole. And so all this is going to be live streamed, and but the live stream will stop after these presentations, and Mona and David will explain why. And yes, so I'll hand over to them now.
Hello. Yeah. Morning everyone.
Try this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome. So we have some COVID restrictions, and a lot of people are not doing so well, or they want to, watch from home because their children are not well or want to take care. So today we have less people here, but we hope that those who are watching online will be able to be with us. So this Dreamweaving session actually is the first session, the first formal session where we actually start weaving the ideas, which means that we will allow for each participant to have about 45 minutes to 1 hour to present, and 20 minutes to present, and then 25, 30 minutes to have a real feedback from the different participants. Before this, we have had a dry run about a week and a half back, and before that, we've had one dream catching session, early morning, 6 to 8 in the morning, where we had like about 18 architects. And today's session is going to be first with these two presentations which we had missed out or which we couldn't accommodate in the technical presentations that we had on the 3rd, 4th, 5th of January. And so today we are going to have first those two sessions, which will be also as inputs which the architects can work with. So these inputs are there for the people who are going to actually actively participate to take it forward. And we have also separated like inputs and outputs. So there are people who are just going to be giving inputs, and there are those who will be working actually in a more detailed manner on the crown, on the full crown or part of the crown. And they will be getting a proper, feedback. So this is the process for today. The whole idea today is that we're not going to live stream after the presentations have been made, because one of the main, I would say, pillars of dream weaving is to create a safe space. And because, as architects, we're quite, we are quite protective of the work we do, and it's quite, it's not usual for us to be in a space where we're talking about our ideas, and actually we're encouraging people in Dreamweaving to steal each other's ideas. This takes a little bit of time. Normally it's a very slow process. This is the first time we're doing it in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So we have to wing it. Actually, David and I are just kind of managing to figure out day to day, because we are also not sure how exactly everybody is going to participate, how much work they are going to be able to do, because everybody is very busy with their own. This just came all of a sudden. Everybody has other commitments. So this has been a great response, we feel, and has a lot of hope that we will be able to come up with something that is tangible and yet carries something of the poetry, something of our dreams and aspirations, something that is not just oriented towards fulfilling the technicalities of what a master plan does. So we want to be able to have this space today where we can have the architects just for themselves. And then eventually on the 4th and 5th February, when we're going to have the larger session with all the people who gave technical inputs, sorry, and all the people who have been randomly selected from the master list, and several other perspective people will be there. So that time we will be able to live stream the whole process, and we hope that then people can actually check in online. So with that, I would like to hand over to David. He's going to clarify some questions maybe and some doubts that people have in mind regarding Dreamweaving. Yeah, David.
I'm on? Yeah. Okay, so it's okay? That sounds very strange. Okay. So yeah, I think between Mona and myself, we'll try and cover different aspects of where we are today. We've been trying to put together a kind of frequently asked questions because we've understood that within the wider community, there's obviously a lot of hope on what the dream weaving process is doing. But alongside that, I think has gone quite a bit of misunderstanding of exactly what the dream weaving is compared to, for instance, to a detailed development plan, etc. So over the years, there have been various attempts made to make detailed development plans in Oroville, and for whatever reason, they haven't really taken off or grounded or whatever. And so when Dr. Ravi came to Oroville in the middle of last year, she heard about dream catching, and she'd approached us to sort of look at how can we bridge where we are today to where we need to be in order to do the detailed development plan. And with the help of Doshiji's office in Ahmedabad, they've been approached to actually do the detailed development plan. And the benefit of all of this, as I've explained a couple of times, we've basically got the galaxy model, which is kind of the original vision that Roger and the mother worked on together. We have the master plan at various stages of development over the last 20, 30 years. And we're now looking, as we bring these things down onto the ground, we're looking to do the detailed development plan, which will give a framework within which Oroville can develop. And that framework obviously has to try and maintain its evolutionary character so that Oroville can continue to evolve over the next 20, 40, 60 years, however long it takes, but also give enough detail and enough information that we can actually be building things on the ground in the right place with the right infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're trying to do with the architects over the next few weeks is actually, as I've been trying to describe it, we can see it as the poetry, we can see it as the choreography, we can even see it as the masala that's trying to bring the galaxy model and the master plan together to give information to Doshiji's office that they wouldn't otherwise have. I think if we see the kind of any sort of township of around 50,000 people that would be developed in India that would need a detailed development plan, for an office of their size, it would be a fairly easy undertaking to do something like this. But because Oroville is so special, and because the galaxy model and the vision that Mother and Roger had is so forward-looking, what we're hoping to do with these Dreamweaving sessions is sort of provide almost like a grassroots input to that process. And that's also where Vastu Shilpa Foundation are very happy to be working with us with the Dreamweaving process. It's an amazing opportunity to explore not just what comes out as an output, but actually how we come with that output. The kind of this sort of community interaction, which is very popular all over the world today. It's an amazing opportunity. And to actually have a grassroots action that is comprised, in this particular case, mostly of architects, is extremely rare and very unusual. So it's an amazing sort of potentially a win-win situation for everybody. So what we're actually looking at is, some people have actually thought that the Dreamweaving is the detailed development plan. So no, it is not the detailed development plan. And the interesting thing, the shift from master plan through Dreamweaving to a detailed development plan enables actually the Oroville architects to come in with all of their knowledge of having lived here for many years in many cases. But in my case, for instance, when we were looking at the earlier Dreamweaving of Crownways, I have an awareness of urban design and an awareness of urban space, but I don't have that specific experience. So it gives the opportunity through this Dreamweaving process to weave all of these ideas together, pass that on to Doshi's office, to the Vastu Shilpa Foundation, where then they can actually tweak it, cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure that the actual scheme works and how that would be how that would work then in a detailed development plan. And the hope is, of course, that as we move on over the rest of this year, this collaboration will continue. So there's also the hope that this Dreamweaving process will simply expand and continue as time goes on. So that was my main point. Also, just in case people think that the Crownways proposal, of course, was the result of a Dreamweaving process back in 2008. But of course, we're now 14 years later, certain parameters might have changed, and we have a completely different group of architects working on it. So people shouldn't expect that the final result will look anything like the Crownways proposal. We're looking for something completely new, and we're looking at the whole crown. We're not looking at just one part of it. This was also a request from the Vastu Shilpa Foundation, because they're trying to look at a detailed development plan for the whole of the township. They're not just looking at one area. The more information they can get from the different architects of Oroville, the more it will help them to work further on the different zones and things like this, because of course the crown goes through the 4 zones as well as the 4 parks. So we have an amazing opportunity here to really sort of touch on some of the essence of what those different 4 zones and what the galaxy model represents as we move forwards into the future. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of issues there. I notice Omar has arrived. I hope he's brought his presentation, and we can move on to that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We'll take a few minutes, I think, to set up Omar's presentation. So just to keep in mind, again, the gongs. So there will be a gong after 30 minutes, 45 and 50 minutes. And yeah, you have 1 hour, including the Q&A for the presentation. So maybe I can read Omar's bio. Omar Rabi is the principal of Unitary Design, a holder of the Master of Science in Architectural Studies from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the Master of Science in Sustainable Environmental Design from the Architectural Association. He has accumulated educational and practical experiences in different regions around the world, from Egypt to the United States, India, the UK, and Japan, where he has led design teams at Kengo Kumar and Associates. Omar is a holder of a few international design competitions awards. Moreover, he has been selected by the International Union of Architects to serve as a jury member in 4 international competitions, most recently in the Velux Award, Daylight for Tomorrow. Besides his work in Oroville, Omar has given lectures, participated in design studio teaching, and reviews at Indian academic institutions, including IIT Kharagpur, CEPT, and Sri Sri University. Moreover, he is currently a member of the Academic Advisory Board of Ashoka University School of Architecture. So I see it's working, and with that, I will hand over to Omar.
Yes. Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So first of all, you have to know it feels comfortable with the whole team, except all the cameras. Yeah, but I told the Citizen Assembly group, guys, I usually sleep very late and I wake up at 10:30 and I start functioning at 10:30, so they wanted to really stress that they are in charge, so they put me at 9. So all questions are welcomed after my coffee, yeah? So, okay, so to start, city form and bioclimatic design, I think everybody expected that I am coming to very much speak about bioclimatic design issues, and I am kind of bored speaking too much about bioclimatic design issues, and the intention was always, I feel there is a misunderstanding because the word city form is the first in the title, and the city form, I feel like with all the unending debates about issues of planning in Oroville, I always felt like if there is some grounding, some understanding of the theory of city form, the discussions could be much deeper. And I started this effort even with some of the youth in Oroville to start having a serious lectures on these issues. And it stops for now, it will come back again. So this is, I hope, can be considered that the more that we have an understanding of the origins of city and why the city take that form while that city that take that form, and what kind of social, cultural, economic forces that lead to them, plus the bioclimatic, of course, the more that we have a deeper debate in Oroville. So yeah, next. So on the origin of cities, so let's just start with a very simple understanding that there are different theories on what makes a city start. And hereby, when I talk about what city in this scenario, I mean the cities that self-generated in a condition in which there was no other cities. Like what would be the first city in the Indus Valley, the first city in Egypt, the first city in Sumeria, the first city in the Mesoamerica? What kind of conditions would lead to this initiation? And there are several theories. For example, the theory of surplus, in which one of the major urban planning theoreticians were saying when there is agriculture enough for the people and there is a surplus of agriculture, then when city starts. And there is another theory, I think by Jane Jacob, when she speaks about the presence of materiality. There is a material, for example, like the case of Satal Hayuk, Tutukan, I think, in which they find obsidian. They find material that it is of very high value. Everybody's using stone, and then they have this beautiful black material that can cut through things in a much more swift way, and then they export it, and that leads to very high economy, leading to a situation, the economy to lead to a city. And then there is the, and this is the theory that I'm most interested in maybe, and it's the latest of Kevin Lynch, and I come from this tradition, and he say, no, it's actually, you will find most of these cases when it starts with a spiritual center. There is a spiritual center, there is all of the temple cities. There's a spiritual center that leads to a specific situation in which there is clergy, or there is a priesthood class, and there is an elite priesthood class leading to the initiation of a city. And this comes, many of these religious cities, and let's see the next one, yeah, on the origin of city. So there are these three different scenarios, but then the question is, and here is because there are three, in our studies we know that there are, to understand different typologies of cities, there is what we call the three normative models of cities: the cosmic model, the machine city, and the organic city. So in this lecture, I focus on the cosmic model city because I feel like we in Oroville sometimes forget that we have a very peculiar case. We are actually a cosmic model city that it is done in pre-industrial, and it doesn't. This type of cities doesn't exist. It's actually existed in prehistoric times. It existed in medieval time, and I think our understanding of that model is of high value for several reasons, because you know the advantages of the model and you try to accentuate, but you also know the deficiencies of this model, or what kind of experiences other societies had with this model, to try to avoid them. And so these are two of these cities that are self-generated in different regions, and both of them are coming. Both of them are in a very different climatic, in a very different situation. This is the city of Ur in Sumeria, and this is Tutukan in Mesoamerica. And you will find the two belongs to the first model city, which is the cosmic model city, in which it's a supernatural model in which there is a belief that the city itself is organized in a way to connect to divinity, and there is an axis mundi. That's, in simple term, how these cities are initiated. But I am putting these two together because on one side you have very geometrical configuration, in which there is a very clear axis, and there is very much, it's all about the connectivity between all of these monumental pyramids. And on the other side, you will find very not geometrical, right? It has all of these irregular streets, which we always feel that these irregular streets we cannot recognize much in these, what we call the cranky maneuvering roads, that we do not recognize necessarily in modern planning as much, but it started to recognize again in postmodern. And we understand that in reality, when you go on experiences, they have very much eloquent experience, the experience of Venice, the experience of Rome, the experience. But on the other hand, how about the geometrical model? It actually has another type of eloquent experience, the experience of this axis going to a monument. So these two models always existed. But then the question is, under which conditions would this exist, and under which conditions would it exist, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each? Yeah, next. So this is the city of Ur, and as you see, we always have the axis mundi in this. Yeah, so we always have the axis mundi in this type of a city, which means a center that is designed for spirituality, and it represents connectivity to heaven or divinity. And most of these cities start with a small chapel, small temple, and then it goes to, there is the situation that leads to this economy. The clergy starts, the elite clergy starts, and then it leads to this very, very dominant space at the center. Most of the time it is a space. Most of the time if we will go to Jerusalem, to Mecca, it's the space that it is holy, and then there is a landmark in the space. But then here, all the surroundings are allowed to, so all the morphology, the urban fabric is allowed to grow without much geometrical constraints, which in most of these cases leads actually to very interesting situations, because most of the passages going to this leads to these surprises. Sometimes you see this monument, sometimes you see that. So sometimes the allowance of this led to very interesting situations. Now, notice also come back. Now, notice also the climatic, because always the culture, and this is something we misunderstand, culture and climate, they are so much all of the time in history. You see them so much together, as if the societies were growing their culture from the ground up slowly with the climate. Just burn it. Yeah. So yeah. So all of the this is in Sumeria in Iraq today, and you see how all of these narrow roads and all the courtyards and all that, you have to have a cranky paths because the dust. So you will find in very dusty situations, very hot climates, always the streets has to take these very natural and irregular forms to prevent the movement of the dust. Now, next, yeah. Now, how about the very geometrical? Because this is one of the cases when you find the capacity of a society to generate a geometrical gesture on a planning level, right? The previous one, there is a geometrical gesture on architectural level, but then on a planning level, it is left to grow as it is. But in this case, there is the deliberate effort to have an axis that goes 4 or 5 kilometers. We are talking a very, very huge promenade, and all of the surroundings are all of these pyramidal geometrical shapes, and one of them represents this is the pyramid of the sun, and this is the pyramid of the moon, and I think the Suma line, the Surya line, it's also, you find some relation to India and Vastu. And through the center, it goes to the governmental and the commercial center, and then it continues. But then when this is very important to understand, when these gestures were done, and this is something that Louis Mumford has mentioned. He said when he looked at some of these walls, and he have found some of the historical walls are 75 feet. And he said there is no practical reason to want a 75 feet. It's not for defense. And he said this very important statement that only for the gods man exert himself so much. And actually, and this is one question that one of my professors did ask us, do you think you can interpret planning fully through Darwinian science? I think it's a very interesting question that through history we have again and again examples of trials to achieve immateriality, but then what is important to understand, what's the cost? So this is when you, see, this is my message always to architects, is to accept that with all of our rational thinking in planning today, what we have learned, have always been examples in which the immaterial exists in planning. But there is, see, this is an introduction to also understand when you are working on a model like this, you have to understand its consequences and try while you are working on it to avoid. So one consequence is that when you really work on a planning gesture of 5 kilometers, anytime you see the same sequence. You exert materiality, you exert energy, you exert the economy. As a consequence, you exploit the human. So many of these examples, they signify models and models again of exploitation of hundreds of thousands, of tens of thousands. So when you are dealing with a geometrical model that comes from this type of a city, then the question becomes, to which degree you can control and to which degree you can offer design solutions so you do not end up going through that path. So my message is accept, because not all planning is what is the modern planning taught in university, but at the same time, to which degree, what kind of an effort can be done to, actually in that case I would argue the connection to the ecosystem is of the highest value. Yeah? Because the model weakness is its incapacity to recognize the material. The model strength is that it creates a very significant identity and feeling. So we just compare between a city like this and Manhattan, in which you go to the center of the city and it's all an expression of the economic forces, right? But a city like this that has identity, has landmarks, has clarity, and the people feel in cities like this nourished in different ways. So it has advantages, and some theoreticians of planning even said, we are missing something in modern planning. There is something to learn from the cosmic model city. But the difficulty of this is the exertion of materiality, the exertion of energy, and there are evidences of cities after cities in which, archaeological cities, I will show some, in which cities like this led to extension of societies because they thought too much about the immaterial, they forgot about water. Literally, we have examples like this. So next, yeah. So, yeah, another click, yeah. Another very clear example of the cities of that model that, another click, yeah. The cities like that survived. The main three cities of that model that survived, Athens, Jerusalem, and Mecca. And you will find their survivability came from, they have the very strong axis mundi. By the way, axis mundi is most of the time either on a hill or in a valley. Does this make any sense? Yeah, the section somehow emphasized that point, always on a hill or in a valley. And you will find the city growing in a very natural ways or in a very practical sometimes ways, but some of them still maintain the old streets. So see, some of these cosmic model city did survive under specific conditions. Next, yeah. Well, let's say when there is less control. Now, with the cases when there is more control, we see, so the three cases of an axis mundi city in which the whole city is about this center, about that center, and each one of them has its own issues and problems. But then there is one, and this is maybe in a way a warning, because when you see the case of Athens, the case of Jerusalem, the case of Mecca, you can understand some parallel issue that could come with this type of a city. Because spirituality, religion, I'm saying spirituality, religion, because I know that the line between could be very thin. You can easily move in between both. But very much could be related to economic forces, and especially if we are thinking of today's terms, neoliberal. Yeah. And of course, when I say neoliberal, I do not, to clarify to some who wouldn't get the difference, I'm not speaking about capitalist forces. I think even if Adam Smith was here, he would be against neoliberal in a way, I would argue, neoliberal dogmas. But then when you see these scenarios, and this is, I think, a major planning issues for the designers, that when there is not much understanding of the value and the relation between spirituality and economy, you could end up with a Big Ben, a huge tower that almost dominate a spiritual city. And this is somehow becomes a little bit of a warning when any planner, when any designer is working on that type of a city, that model of a city, they have to be very conscious of the possibility that because spirituality generate money. And you have to be very, and you do not want to stagnate. You do not want not to allow the money, but at the same time, you want to regulate in a way through planning to assure that the spirituality of a space is very much intact and respected. And that needs both political will and the consciousness and the awareness of the planners who would put the right regulations to avoid such scenarios. Yeah, next. Now, formal culture these cities, even within this type of a city, the cosmic mall city, you find that there are big refinements. And the two major cultures that has the highest and more elaborate cosmic mall city are India and China. So the next, yeah. So, and you see how much culture and very much culture understanding could really have an impact here. And you can see that actually one of the most amazing tools to understand a culture is architecture and city, because it's just the physical manifestation. When you go to all the historical writings, you will find that they represent different opinions and different thoughts and power, while architecture is so difficult to not be honest and planning. And you will find this is the Forbidden City in China, and this is Madurai. And they show very different type of understanding of life and understanding of spirituality, in which the case of the Forbidden City, and I hope not to cause another diplomatic issue between India and China with some officials here. There is this very clear axis and compartments. And you cannot go to the this is the axis mundi, the connection between the heaven. It's not at the center, it's at the end. And you have to go through staircases, and there's a gate, staircase is a gate, staircase is a gate. Do we have a pointer? Yeah. Staircases, yeah, okay. Staircases, gate, staircases, gate, staircases, gate, until you get there. And all of these are walled. So it's boxes inside a box. You have the box, and then you have another box, another box, another box. Inside the box, there's another box. And there is a time at the evening time, at the sunset time, in which there is specific music and sounds, and then everybody has to be in their boxes, inside their own walls, and they are only allowed to go outside early in the morning. So the value of discipline, the spirituality is very much related to discipline, to order, and you see, when you make a city, you have to understand that it is coming from your culture, but it is also creating your culture. It's the motto in architecture: you create your own house, and then your house creates you. Now, Madurai is very different. Madurai, you find it has the temple at the center, but then you have all of these crowns, basically, rotation around, and it comes from the rituals. The rituals, you have to go from the temple, and you have to make all of these rotations. So it's less of an expression of pushing for order and discipline and even control over segments of a society. It's more the relation between the spirituality of a place and all of the people. So you find here there is a class, and I'm a little bit stepping outside my territory. So please take it as the foreigner is trying to understand what is happening in India from a distance, just like that. So there is a class of clergy, a class of the Brahman, and then they have to go outside, connect to the people, and come back. But the people are allowed to go in, and there is very little preventions. It's actually always about a connection from inside outside. And when you look at Oroville, you will find something happening like this, because the whole design, as it was initiated early, is about the inside-outside connection. And this is, for me, was something to notice, that it is part of the spirituality of India in general, this in-out connection. Yeah. Next. So to the question of degree of control, when we are working on planning issues, to which degree you can actually control, it's very easy to control on architectural level, because we do the design, we produce all the detailed drawings, and then we build it. But on a planning level, where there are different lands, different modules, different plots, different stewards, different owners, different designers, different contractors, different forces, cultural forces, economic forces, all of this. How to do that? And the more you control, the more you can, in some cases, create problems. So the question is the question that I asked early: to which degree you can have control? And you see the successful examples where the axis mundi with very little control around it. So I will show, because we are dealing with this old long fight in Oroville on circle. And I give you four examples of circular cities. And let's see what can we learn from them. Yeah, next. Yeah. Because I was so surprised that in some of the discussions, some Orovillians came and said there is no circular cities, but they do exist, and there is lots to learn from them. This is a city that I never was able to pronounce its name. So it's in the south of Russia. and it has this circular geometry, and at the center there is this space that it is observatory to the sky, and it's very much related. It's the axis mundi. It's a smaller scale, so it's easier to control the geometry, as you can see, but it is one of the examples that we actually did see as when you work on a model city of the axis mundi, the model city of the cosmic model, and you try to control too much, be very careful, because some of these societies did extend. So this is an example of that. Some of these societies did extend because they did not consider other issues. And again, this is not a call to avoid that, to ignore the model. It is the model we are working on. But to say, but that actually gives more importance to harmony with the climatic and topography and water systems. Next. Baghdad, not many people know that Baghdad was actually designed as a circular city, and at the center there was the either the mosque or the caliph house, and then there is the open space, and then you have the always one of the issues of this typology of the city, that land gets more value the closer it is to the center. So you will find most of the people surrounding the caliph will be living here, and then the others, and then the crown basically. And it's in this case you see how narrow it is, because this type of a climate, which is the hot, harsh, dry, has to have this kind of a situation. Yeah. But what we learned from here, the first one, we learned that in some cases you extend. Yeah, there is extension, but in other cases you learn that it never stays. So sometimes you try to control geometry, but if you go today to Baghdad, you don't even find traces of that. So what kind of resilience, when you work in a city that try to control geometry, the question would be, what kind of resilience, what elements you need to do so it live, so it's not only achieved, it's achieved and it can live. Yeah, next. And then I found this, and I was trying to look for a modern example, and I found one of the kibbutz, I think called Halala or something like this. But in this case, it has a very different approach. The approach was absolutely not spiritual. It was social. It was try to emphasize equality. The symbol was the circle. Now, I think these examples, for me, teach us something, because this is exactly what, when we go to the next slide, we'll find that this is exactly what not the model of Oroville was trying to achieve. Because the obviousness and clarity of the dig of a circular road has a very different experience than what we have seen in the vision model of Oroville. And I think one good way to get a sense of the experience, because I did ask people who have been there, and they were saying not so amazing experience, because the road like this would always lead to the less connectivity between the two sides, and it leads to a feeling of a vehicular road. Yeah, next. Of course, it's very low density, but then the fourth example I know, which is Oroville. Yeah, and in this case, I think you can see that unlike the three previous cases, you will find the clarity of the circular geometry is much less, right? There is some ambiguity here, and I think it's intentional ambiguity. You can trace that there is something that it is passing by and disappears on the building, it passed by again, disappeared on the building, it passed by again, right? And that actually create a very different sense of the experience in comparison to the previous one. And I think one of the important things to achieve, if you are going to achieve this model, is to focus on this connectivity, either the connectivity of the built environment or the connectivity of the environment on this side, and that could lead to a very more interesting model in comparison to the three previous models that we have seen from prehistoric, medieval, and modern. Yeah, next. Now the bioclimatic dimension, and here is my trial to get bioclimatic to this theory of city form. Of course, I did not mention much about the organic model. I focused on the cosmic model. I did not mention the mechanical, and they both has a lot to learn from. And I think at the end, a successful city in the modern time would have still characteristics from the organic and characteristics from the mechanical, which is more efficient. But the time, I think, wouldn't allow for it to go deeper, but this is for another time. So now the bioclimatic dimension, next. I get back to the origins of bioclimatic design and Victor Olgayai in the late 60s, in which he produced this seminal publication, Design with the Climate, and it shows, that was the first trial, because modern planning fully ignored bioclimatic issues, fully. It was all about the infrastructure, the streets, boxes of buildings completely separate. If you look at the cases of Brasilia, the cases of Chandigarh, in which very little sensibility towards the climate. At the same time, Victor Olgae was a modernist, but at the same time, he was trying to bring some understanding of bioclimatic issues. And he comes with this hybrid, I would say. It's still very modernist approach. Still, you can see all of the separations between the streets and the streets separate from the building. There is very little urban fabric, especially in the case of the hot and humid. But at the same time, he tried to follow some of the bioclimatic design principles. And in these two scenarios, he actually made what would be a model city in the modern time, in the hot and dry, in the hot and humid, in the cold, in the temperate. And I here would say I only selected the hot and dry and hot and humid because they are the two that could impact our design in Oroville, while the temperate and the cold are a little bit further. So you see, the one thing that distinguishes hot and dry is that you will find the creation of internal courtyards, internal microclimate, basically, or internal cool spots, right? And there is orientation, because in all modern, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in all modern architecture, you will find some orientation. Orientation is a very major, and most of the time it is to the south. Most of the facade will be to the south and to the north, right? And you will find all of these opportunities once you have a volume mostly on south and north. You are having a very favorable energy situation, because most of the energy, most of the solar radiation would come from the east and the west, the most difficult to protect, while the south the sun is very high, is very easy to protect with an eave, and the north has very little direct solar radiation. So you will find some kind of orientation in this scenario, but less of importance when it comes to the tropical hot and humid. Always the hot and humid is the climate with the highest importance to achieve orientation, because the sun is very high, the sun is very difficult to protect from other than the south and the north. And also in many cases you will find the direction of the wind, like in Oroville, would be compatible with this. So the favorable direction of the wind in Oroville is the southeast, southwest a little bit more the southeast. And you can orient a building to be very much stretched on the east-west axis, and then it works. But then and this is not a push for this, it's almost a critique, but then when you look at the proportions and the buildings in the hot and dry, you will find less importance to orientation. They have the same size on the two sides here, right? So there is very little orientation, but it's more about the creation of these internal spaces. While here you have to open and you have to have more spaces and more both open space or transitional spaces, like that kind of a space outside, these kind of covered spaces, they could really lead to a much better climate. So, but then this is also for me a critique for this, because I was so fascinated by this approach at the beginning, and then but that doesn't lead to a nourishing city. If you fully do a city through orientation, you always end up with a city of one orientation, a city of too much regular, and it's not nourishing, and it's very difficult actually to achieve that. So, but then I look for other examples, and I look at the vernacular, because this is the modern approach. When I look at the vernacular, and these again the same two climates, and suddenly there is zero orientation. And this is when I feel like this is to me a more interesting approach. And for Oroville, I would feel we can learn from this a lot, because the possibility to achieve orientation in a circular city with all of these multiple orientations. So what is the other approach? The other approach, if you cannot achieve orientation, which bring all of these advantages, microclimate. And you will find historical architecture and vernacular cities managed to achieve enormous results without much orientation through the concept of we are establishing a completely different microclimate. Now, how did this happen? This is one of the North African cities, and you see the hot to dry climate. Hot and dry climate, the temperature is 55 degrees, is 50 degrees, is 45 degrees. You cannot do it without all of these very small and narrow corridors and very much walkable. Very much the experience is amazing, actually, when you walk in these cities. And it keeps rotating and changing its direction and avoid the dust. Any air that goes inside cools because all of these surfaces are cool because of all the shading. And gradually, when they move, they cool slowly, so the crankiness is a very much a bioclimatic advantage. And then even the shapes of a plaza, you find it's almost carved to achieve maximum shade. So always the proportion of the buildings, the proportion, and it's all about either narrow paths or cuts of courtyards, and this proves to be working amazingly climatically. Now, when we go to something, this is in South Sudan, and we will look at something in the hot climate, hot and more humid. And you will find it's a completely different configuration that it is designed for the air. Because when you go to the more hot and humid, you will find that the most important aspect is the air. By the way, Oroville is a little different, and we will come to that. But the pure hot and humid always is about air. And you will find all of these circular geometries, all of these circular huts always have spaces in between, right? And if you find all of these geometries are actually almost designed to allow for this flow of air. And circular geometries, when these huts are open, they let air go, but when they are closed, circular geometries spin airflow. So you know when a car has all of these geometries and the air spin around it, right? So that it has an aerodynamic qualities to it that makes it spin. And here, why they designed this? Because the most important life happen in the in between spaces. So the life of these villages, most of the women with the kids, the men are doing this, are always happening in spaces in between. And we always find in cities and in human-built environments that the designers, the builders will put more emphasis on transitional spaces when the life of a society is in between, while it is more on internal spaces when the life is inside the space. Now, what would be the case of the crown? I think the crown is mostly about the life than the building itself. So it's something that we can learn, that when there is a design on the crown, you are focusing more on the transitional spaces, because most of the life happening, how many cafes in Oroville happen inside space? All the cafes are shade, right? So it's all about the creation of transition space of covered, of no sun, solar radiation, and very good airflow. Now, this doesn't necessarily, so I wouldn't feel very disappointed, because it's actually, when you look at the vision model of Oroville, it's confusing because you have no orientation. At every single, I tried to make a study of the sun and I couldn't, because, oh my God, every single step I have a different angle. But then you shift your thinking to microclimate. You shift your thinking, okay, we do not have orientation. What kind of general rule can I achieve? And then the proportion becomes the highest importance. This is why I have been emphasizing the proportion of the street, because you do not have orientation. You are always having an unfavorable situation because you are always changing orientation. So focus on creating a microclimate that could create to a better climate. Next. This is the 30, right? Yeah, good. Very good. So now to a little bit scientific, just a little, to understand climates, we use one of the most, let's say, rigorous graphs is the psychometric chart, because it has all the data. You have at least on one side, you have the temperature, and then you have these lines are the humidity, and then these lines are this is the dry bulb temperature, this is the wet bulb temperature. I won't go through details, but I just give you the idea. The more that you go up in this region, you have more humidity. The more you go in that direction, you have more temperature. The more you go here, you have less temperature. So you imagine a cold climate, Montreal will be somewhere here. Most of the dots represent a reading of temperature, humidity, dry bulb, wet bulb, all at the same time. So Montreal, if you have all the points here, to simplify it, will be the cold climate. If you have most of the dots here, and it goes above 40, but it has less humidity, it's most of the time here, or here in extreme cases, or here, that will always be the hot and dry. The hot and dry also will be always extending a little bit because it goes very hot and very cold. When you have here, you are having more towards the hot and humid, right? So when you look at the climate of Oroville, the climate of Tamil Nadu, you will find it is initially, the first vision will be, oh, it initially feels like hot and humid. But there is something, because because you can go into, and this is something that took me some time to understand, you can go through the problem of, create a problem when you define it, it's hot and humid, go to the textbooks and find the textbook solutions for the hot and humid. It's not always going to work. Because, why? Next. Because the textbooks are designed for this hot and humid. The textbooks are designed for Bangkok, for Florida, for Malaysia, Thailand. It is the very pure case of the hot and humid. The very pure case of the, what we call more accurately, warm and humid. The very pure case always has temperature that goes a little beyond above 30, 32, 33, maximum. But all of the time it is humid. So in that scenario, the importance of air, it's all about air. It's all about air. And you want very low thermal mass all the time. Low thermal mass would work day and night, right? Temperature is not high. Let the air go all the time, right? Now, next. No. Back. Back. Oh, there is one slide. Yeah, no, you are right. Next. Yeah, so usually, as I was saying, this kind of a climate, which is the pure warm and humid, doesn't close. You find all of the buildings are designed on stilts like this. The life mostly happens here. All are open. The planning fabric, the urban fabric, is very sparse. You want a building, you want a space, you want another building, you want another space. You do not want to bring them too much beside each other. When you even design a house, you want to separate the kitchen from the living room. The kitchen will bring you all of these fumes, all of this humidity. You do not want them together. It's all about separation and links. So very low thermal mass. We mean by low thermal mass, very light building, high thermal mass, these heavy buildings that take temperature and store it and bring it back to you at night. Next. What's the difference is this? The difference between the typical climate that exists in, and this is why I'm becoming more and more not interested in textbooks of bioclimatic, because it took me some time to get there, but because they come to something like this, and rarely they resolve these issues, and that's why you have to study really climate by climate. So the difference is this is the case that we have seen of the pure hot and humid, but then you have extreme heat. So actually, if we think about the temperature in Oroville, you will find that when it comes to humidity, it's closer to the hot and humid most of the time. But when it comes to temperature, the temperature significantly increased beside the typical limits of the hot and humid. The typical limits of the hot and humid is the design temperature 32, while here we have a design temperature of 39. Design temperature, we mean we canceled the 1% extreme. So if Oroville, for example, get to 42, but this is the 1% extreme, the design temperature will be 39. So that difference is huge. And then you could come with a different result. I actually would conclude that the low thermal mass would still be the best to sleep, because at night the temperature will drop 5, 6, 7 degrees. The airflow, any building with low thermal mass will be fantastic to sleep. It will be fantastic at night. But workplaces, I would argue that in some cases, a heavier building that protect from this high temperature would work better. So in some cases, and then you can choose either you have a building with adaptive opportunities that can be heavy and light, which could be very tough to do, or you select based on the function what is light and what is heavier, what is light, based on the time that it is used, mostly. Next. So and this is why I always, you know why this research? Because I was always saying low thermal mass everywhere, because this is what the books say. But I look at the vernacular architecture in the region, and I find the kacha and the paka. And the kacha is very light, and the paka is heavy to some degree. And I'm like, but I know that vernacular architecture doesn't do it wrong. The paka, that model doesn't exist in Malaysia, doesn't exist in Indonesia. I know that these are thousands of years of experiences, and it is impossible that they got it wrong. And I'm like, no, we got it wrong. There must be something missing. And I came to this, and I see that they do so some of the characteristics of the hot and dry exist in hot and humid. I think one researcher, one major in bioclimatic, I think Zokolai has really went through this, and I said, there is a proof that some of the heavy mass buildings has some advantages in this hot and humid climate. But with variation, it will not be the exact same courtyard that exists in the hot and humid, in the hot and dry that will exist in the hot and humid. It has different proportions, it has different solutions. And when I looked at this, I think there is something to learn in our design practices in Oroville. Next. So you will find that, for example, on a plan level and on a section level, let's see some differences of things that I have seen in the in these solutions. So see, urban fabric, these are buildings that are touching each other, that have certain density, and you can achieve certain density, but the problem will be the air. So how to deal with this? So on a plan level, porosity. Porosity. Recently, I made a comment on noticing that in Tamil Nadu, even people spontaneously make door after door after door after door after door. And that was a cultural comment because we know that always climate leads to specific cultural understanding. So because when you align these doors, you are creating the sense of porosity to create airflow. Now, interestingly, in climates like this, you will find people automatically have less comfort with privacy. They are more open to, like the climate has an impact or more acceptance to sound, which is a problem we have in Oroville because we come from different culture to a climate that actually asks you to accept sound. Because the only way is to accept sound because the air moves with the sound. But this, when you go to this culture, you will find that the opening, you cannot, has anybody seen Haveli in Rajasthan in which it has this alignment? I didn't see in Cairo. You will find people naturally, to avoid this situation of a dust coming and a hot air coming, they will shift. And they create these kind of entrances. As you see, the climate is leading to a cultural situation. And then what happens? So on a plan, you can create different types of porosity. I mean, the modern architect has the right to see in the current situation how to really take an idea like this and elaborate in all kinds of forms and ways. Now, what happens on the section level? You will find that the courtyard is there, but the roofs are aerodynamic roofs. There's something we call Kowanda effect. Who knows? You know, when you have a ball like this and you have a drop of water, the water will touch the surface of the ball and rotate, right? Why? Because once the drop touches the ball, it creates a different pressure. There is less pressure on the inside than the outside, and then it pushes in that direction until it falls. So now, how about air? When you have a roof like this, the air touches the roof, it creates that difference of pressure, it goes down. So you can, of course, also create a situation in which you have these roofs to get the air down as a wind catcher you can find. So, but just I'm opening doors. When you are thinking heavy and dense environment, a combination of a dense environment. By the way, dense, it could mean dense of urban fabric, it could mean dense of nature, and it could mean a mix of both. But it has to have intensity and density to create the microclimate. But with the cuts in the plans and the sections and the aerodynamic roofs to create this kind of an inside flow. And I think a combination like this, if well shaded and have density and good airflow, it could lead to a very favorable microclimate. Initially, I would say something like this. Yeah. Next. Okay. Good. So I took this from the study of Helmut and Billinger, and I thought it's very interesting because it is yes a study on mobility, but it is very compatible with bioclimatic design studies. So when he said the crown could be like this or like this, because he has seen the crown as a changing phenomenon, a changing experience, and sometimes it could be a pass between heavy trees, and sometimes it could be very. I think this is Germany or somewhere, but I wouldn't have a big plaza. I would focus on more paths and smaller plazas, and if there is a big plaza, it has to be shades. But he was speaking about street life, and street life could be having lush nature, or it could have intense situation of built environment, or both, or it's a mix of both. And I feel like it resonates bioclimatically, because this is exactly how to create a microclimate, and this is exactly how to create. This is absolutely a microclimate. This here absolutely is a microclimate. So again, the intensity of density somehow, either through nature or through, and to accept that sometimes it's nature, sometimes it's building, sometimes it's weave between both. Next. Well, going back to Roger, because I thought I always go and try to look at the original design. It's almost a professional position. If I come to a place, there have been plenty of work. I like to look at it and see what we can learn from it. And this is one of the trials, and it shows, because I'm looking for the sketches that represent some path for bioclimatic solutions in a way. And this was a sketch that was done for the nebula. And it shows, this is for me one of the examples in which there is really a microclimate situation, because we said it's either intensity of a tree and ecosystem and nature, or intensity of buildings. And I understood that he was very fascinated with the North African and Mediterranean cities, in which you have all of these narrow alleys, and then you go up, and then you go down, and you cannot recognize if you are up or down. So this I see as this intensity. It seems like there is. It shows that there was not very little, mostly thinking of connections of pedestrian movement than anything else. I would only object to the emphasis of the movement on the upper level. From a bioclimatic point of view, I don't think this would work. I think what would really work is to create a situation of multi-levels, fine, but from a bioclimatic point of view, the main movement is down when it is really shaded, and when there is, especially if there is enough gaps and well-targeted gaps to create airflow. So again, this is just, I'm putting it as an example in which I look at it, I see microclimate, I feel it. Next. And then you will find this, and I looked at this again, and it shows how, for example, again, the emphasis of this the path that goes and it's covered and it is shaded and it is, but then so the question is how to create a situation in which it is shaded, either with buildings or in some cases trees, or so, because these are indication of buildings, it could be indication of shades, it could be indication of platforms. And how all of these could work, because it shows a situation of the intensity I'm speaking about. Either intensity of ecosystems coming or intensity of buildings and shades. I think there is a possibility to create microclimate in these situations, especially when you recognize the air direction and start having porosity in the direction of the air. Next. This is the problem statement to the Dreamweaving, because with all of the elaborate examples that we have seen in all of the intricate paths, all of the shades, all of the intensity of the microclimate, all of this, we are today in a situation in which there is an infrastructure plan. And when we transform the infrastructure plan directly to architecture, this is the space left for tree, which basically means you cannot have heavy vegetation here, if this is spread in this way, and this is 16.7. This is the carriageway. Next. So when I did this, transform this simply to architecture, and I allowed the tree only in this kind of a space, and I started studying the heights of the buildings according to our understanding, G+2, G+3, and then see what kind of sun situation we have. And I find, of course, in June, when the sun is very high, you have majority of the streetscape. You have only tree here, which is very close to the building, which means that it has very little success shading the street. But it has very enormous success preventing sound. It's not with no value. It has preventing sound from that building. So these buildings actually are, in a way, if the trees are aligned so close, it is good for the building, but it has very little capacity to cover the solar radiation here. But this is normal. Usually in June, 3 p.m. By the way, when we say 3 p.m., you have lots of sun. 12 p.m., of course, you will have anyway lots of sun. That means that from 9, that means from 9 to 3, you have 6 hours of very much solar radiation exposure. Next. But what worries me is March, because always we look at the equinox as the middle case. When you have, June is the highest case, but marsh is the middle case. And if when you go and you do studies in marsh, you know that majority of the year you have major sun exposure. So this is a problem statement with this kind of a situation when you have enormous sun exposure in very hot climate in which the temperature comes to 42, but the design temperature is 39, what to do. And this is when we say there should be some system of engaging inside. And I think when Helmut in mobility said, in a shared mobility space when it is designed for the pedestrian, streets can even be at the middle of the street because it's actually help. You already have a shared mobility system because when you say slow cars, 15 kilometers per hour, and mainly pedestrian, that means by default shared space. It means a space that is shared between the pedestrian and the cars and the small-scale cars, but with domination of the pedestrian. In that case, even when you have some landscape and cityscape inside the street, it actually makes the car only slowly move around. It becomes a physical way to slow down the cars, even while maintaining geometry. It is not changing geometry, it's just changing the movement of the car. And this could work with the bioclimatic because you can allow for some ecosystems to come inside, but also allowing for possibilities of shading. Because who said you cannot have light shades? You can have some systems to have functions in this streetscape. So how to do, and this is for me a problem statement. You are having this situation. What can you do to establish a new situation in which two things, microclimate is acceptable? Because, by the way, this is an understatement. Because this is only saying as if this is the ideal orientation. Remember, this is rotating. So the sun is not only coming from the section direction, it is coming from the angle, also from the angle. So you are talking about a street that it is two things. You need a microclimate that it is much better based on all the studies I have shown. But also, you need to connect. Remember the issue of connectivity in all this type of a city in which there is in-out connectivity. It's like the city of Madurai in which people go outside to connect. So this connectivity from inside to outside, you need to establish this. So this is a design problem. You have to find a way to solve. Next. Another problem is the issue of the ridge. I am not sure. I was asking yesterday, this is the ridge, right? The ridge will be more like this. You told me yesterday this. So okay. Huh? Yeah. So it's correct, right?
Where is your north?
This is the north.
No, north is on the left.
Okay, but this is the lowest, right? You go lowest here. This is the important part for me. This is the industrial zone.
No, then it's necessary.
Yeah?
It's the lowest then.
This is the lowest, right, in the industrial zone. So if the air is coming more from this direction, and you have the lowest here, you have one issue, because this part of the crown is easy to get air to, while that part of the crown could be very difficult. You have the air up. So one thing you need, this is another statement problem. You have part of the crown that it is very down while the air, because it's in a wind shadow zone. You have the air up. What kind of means you can do to bring it down? And next, yeah. I'm finished?
No, you still have some time.
Yeah, next. So one thing I like to do in this exercise when we look at a model like this is not to look at it all at once. Because go back again, I think we forget, keep looking at the totality of geometry, which is, we see to which degree, I mean, only time would prove to which degree something like this is possibility, to have a totality of geometry over that scale, right? But at the end, cities are experienced as a collage, not as a classic painting, right? So next. So one exercise I would like to do is to start cutting pieces and start imagining what kind of experiences would happen in a space like this, and to see to which degree a design conception like this could inspire some principles. Because I always say, what is the essence? I'm not for completely ignoring a story or completely applying. It's always the question, what is the essence? What can you learn from this? And then how to bring it to reality, the grounding work. So what is the essence of this? And what is the essence of this? And what's the essence of this? And one thing, and how this could relate to the climate. Again, that situation of intensity. here, again, the concept of connectivity. You have this feeling of urban building connectivity, how this can be achieved. And I like to take it like this, connectivity. How can I achieve it? How is it doable in the current situation to achieve? With the topography, with the water, with this. So connectivity. Here, by the way, is already, if you assume that these megastructures are there, you have no problem at all with the microclimate. This is overshaded, and lots of wind will come in. I think it would be a very big mistake to design assuming they are there, because even if they are there one day, you don't know when. And I think part of the design is to design assuming phasing, and you have to assume, no, we are not so protected by these. We are having a situation that it is difficult. The air is up, we are down, very little capacity to shade, and we have to get some wind. Now, what can we learn from this? This is, to me, one of the examples I keep looking and repeating, that it is misleading to say, it is very much a mistake to say the crown is all about this connectivity, because there are several areas in which you see even the conceptual design is really clarifying that there is an ecosystem connectivity. So these could be very light structures, and they could have trees coming, because if this is a park, and by the way, the park forest, what's the difference between a park and a forest? I mean, in cities, we do have very elaborate ecosystems inside cities. We have Tiergarten in Berlin, we have Amstead Heath in the UK, in London, we have Roppongi in Tokyo. We have very elaborate system. The difference is that it is designed on the ground level to have more accessibility to the human experience. But that doesn't mean canceling a very elaborate ecosystem. It is just accepting the ecosystem that belongs to this ground and transform it into a park because it has more accessibility. But the park experience should continue, because you have to be able to walk the crown without feeling there's interruption in the experience, but you have also to walk the park without feeling that there is interruption. And how to achieve this if you actually accept that there is nature coming within the streetscape. It's not completely separate. This is a harsh vehicular street, and this is achievable. It's not achievable. And you can. I am also against those who were saying we completely interrupt the crown experience. No, the crown experience should also be continuous. So, and this is for me a design exercise, and it's a choice always. Do you want to deal with it as it's a conflict and you have to choose one, or it is a good design opportunity for innovation in which things are happening on levels, things are happening, and there is this connectivity between the two intersections? I would select always that it is not a conflict. It's a design imaginative exercise. Culture zone. One thing when I find sudden change in geometry, first of all, if you actually manage in reality to achieve something with that density, which I don't think is that possible, this is a very indicative mass model, you will have an ease with the ecosystem for sure, because you have a very shaded, if there is porosity, if it's a combination of heaviness and porosity. But what if? But this is not this. It's a mass model. At the end, there will be shades, there will be trees, there will be nature also, there will be a mix of buildings and nature. But what we can learn from this is the change of geometry. The change of geometry means change of light and shade situation. And this is what I mean by essence. If you see something like this, you could say, the cultural zone has a different nature of geometry that could lead to a different nature of sun-shadow situation. That's it. And if it has a different sun, a 90-degree building has a specific feeling, a 120-degree building has a different feeling, a smooth curve would have a different feel. Just if you focus on this, that when you move from this zone to this zone, or from this area to this area, it feels different. That it has a very different geometrical code. Just a trial to see what can we get from this next. I think I will cancel next. Back. This is the last one. So the same I said here is here, and is here. So I see, and the same I said with the built environment connectivity, you find it in somewhere else. So if you see it, why I am saying this, because I see it as an advantage also for the bioclimate. It's a city form that has a bioclimatic advantage. It's not only, it's a spiritual, this is when I feel the material meets the immaterial. You have in one cases the possibility to have intense situation of ecosystem connectivity, and you have in other cases possibility of having a sense of built connectivity. Could be light shades, could be nothing, could be very simple elements. And it doesn't mean that it is that rigid. It could be in some cases this is cut with something, this is cut with something. But if you have this duality of in-out connectivity, and it is done in a way to protect for the sun as much as possible while there is porosity to bring air, I think this is one way to get some favorable climatic microclimate situation. Next. And then at the end, I felt like I have to put these two together because at the end of the day, it is the real challenge. I mean, I have been showing what we can get from this exercise, but at the end, why all of these linear elements are going in that direction? Because there is topography. And always in all the cases that we have seen for the cosmic model city, you will find most of them were really able to control geometry because they were flat. Most of the cases, we have seen the cases in the, from the Mesoamerica to Sumeria to most of these cases are flat. And once you have a situation in which there is topography and there are people living here, and anything you do is impacting what's happening here, there is a topographical element. And then this becomes the real, and guys, good luck. I mean, it's a challenge in which it is very tough. I have no idea. And how these geometries can come with something like this, with these natural systems. But I think one of the problems that I have seen in Oroville is that lots of work happening here and lots of work happening in exploration of geometry, and very little effort to investigate to which degree this exploration of geometry can fit this, and to which degree this can have some elements of the qualities of this. And to me, this is a closing statement in a way, because when we say we come together, we come actually to come to that challenge that was because of the grouping didn't happen much, or very little happened of it. It feels like we are more comfortable working on that level. We are more comfortable only exploring geometry and or working on that level. But they have to meet. If they do not meet, it will not happen anyway. If they do not meet, it will be at every single point you're doing something and you discover, oh, I'm cutting a water system, it leads to a problem. I need enormous amount of money to do it because it's against the natural system, it's against the topography. The only way is to find this kind of a space and to have the courage to come and meet and see what of this. And then you can define what is the essence, what elements can be achieved. Not everything can be achieved. What elements can be achieved, what elements cannot be achieved. Yeah, thank you. Questions after coffee? Yeah. Okay, questions before coffee. I got all of the energy I have.
We do have time for a few questions.
Okay, yeah,
Do you think we can take a few?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so everyone let David know if you have a question, and he will write down the names.
Just a point on the bioclimatic, the light structures and the heavy structures, and how from my experience and what I've built, it works. Yeah, from where my experience and what I've built is what you were saying correctly, that you have to have a mix of everything actually.
In Tamil Nadu?
Yeah, here in Oroville. So the light structure to sleep under, and the heavy structure to live in. And what I felt works very well is you have spaces which can open and close.
Absolutely.
And be shaded. So you minimize the solar radiation, of course, the solar impact. And then keep your structures light, but keep them also so that you can open and close them. And that somehow seems to work. So it also helps for the noise. So when it gets too noisy, you close. And you have a fan.
Okay.
Just as a comment.
Yeah, you are right. One of the most major issues in bioclimatic design is what we call adaptive opportunities. That and the more it is simple, it is doors that we can move ourselves and we can change its angle, and the best it is. The more it is mechanical and confused and technological, the worse it works actually. So you are right. It is just that you have to remember that no matter what you do, when you say, I am gonna ignore the heavy mass, and I am going to depend on operable multi-layered openings, because what you are describing is something that includes glass, and it has to include mosquito mesh, right? That's the minimum too, right? And then with glass and mosquito mesh, it's not enough protection from the sun unless you have very big eaves, and it's very well oriented. And if you are in a situation here in which you have to orient east and west, right? And then you cannot really protect, so it becomes extremely difficult to achieve and expensive, and it will never, no matter what you do, will be equal to the mass that has very good insulative capacities, no matter what, because this is glass. Glass has very little capacity to insulate. So still, adaptive opportunities are fantastic, but I don't think it is enough to cancel the need of thermal mass in many cases. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Omar, thanks so much. That was so interesting. I have several comments. I'll try. So one thing is, again, taking off from what Dorla said, I feel we have to get away from this idea that, there are bedrooms and living rooms and kitchens, and I think the modern lifestyle and also the way we design, like what I've discovered, like I'm a nomad in my own house because I keep on shifting my space of sleeping and working as per the climate. So terraces, for example, to sleep in summer, where we have still the possibility in a place like Oroville to do that would be very important. Secondly, having just lightweight structure, sometimes I find it's a bit cold, like in this time, I would find it cold. Like right now I'm sleeping in a dome and it's perfect. But I wouldn't sleep in a dome in summer or in the intermediate time, So one good example which I always haven't really replicated, but I think Ajit's house in Samasti tried that. What he did is mass at the bottom, and as you go up, and he has the sleeping like lightweight pavilion on the top. But again, he has to shift, like lightweight pavilion, which is like will not work if it is fully in the winter time. At least that's my experience. So I think this idea of changing spaces, like this fixed idea, this is bedroom, this is also very architecture, right? I don't think society has worked like that, actually, originally. This courtyard house that you showed, people use the courtyards to sleep and do a lot of activities. And we see that even at an urban scale. In Ahmedabad, there's this very famous example of Manik Chowk, which changes use as per day and night. So daytime it is something else, and nighttime it's a bazaar, and daytime. So this kind of things, we have to change our thinking a bit. The other thing was, Victor Olge, you said, Design with Climate. There's another very interesting book, perhaps you've heard of it, Thermal Delight in Architecture.
By
Lisa Hejong.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a really, I think that kind of breaks this, because I think like Design with Climate was also written at a time when modern architecture, was having all these principles and all. But I think we've moved beyond that. We have realized that we are missing the sensual, the sensuous, the immaterial, what you call the intangible. And all these have to
phenomenological aspects.
Yeah, exactly, the phenomenological. So Juhani Palasma, etc. would be, so that was, I found would be interesting. And the last one is about rituals. So when you gave the example of the Madurai thing, Madurai temple and the lost forbidden city, lost forbidden city. I want to just say that every ritual requires order and discipline. Whatever it is, wherever you go, and also within that Madurai, or any other complex, or even all the temple cities, there is a lot of order and discipline in that. It's just that in India we always manage to combine the two in a very flexible, loose manner. It wasn't rigid, and I always find this very interesting. As we design also as architects, this rigidity, this thinking, these mental patterns that are so set in our minds, especially with the kind of education that we have to break those. And Oroville does that very well if you stay here long enough, and if you face all the challenges that it gives you, it kind of makes you realize that this is not going to work. Like you said, you don't go by textbook anymore, because it just doesn't work. You have this combination and everything is like that. And so I think it's very, I thought that was important also to. There's much more, but yeah, I found it really interesting. Thank you so
No,
much.
I will definitely not comment on any comment you said about temples and rituals. I take it from you. The first point you have made is very interesting because this is where bioclimatic design is today at the highest level of academia. They are saying we used to be very adapted in our houses. When you look at the Malay house with all of these surfaces and people sleep and live and they change it. When you look at the old houses in some of the cold climates in which they were sleeping in some place in the summer, and then when the winter comes, they go up and they bring the animals to live on the ground level because they generate heat going up. And you will find people actually used to, because why? Because they didn't have electricity and they didn't have all the mechanical means. And this completely a shift because we feel like we can do whatever we can because we have technology to counter it. But we're discovering after 50 years of trying technology that is actually the problem. It is leading to the erosion of the chances of life on organized civilized life on this planet because we think we can control. But we need to go back to some sense of if you don't use energy, technology, unless needed. And these are one of the ways we adapt, we live in harmony with nature. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That was quite a tour de force.
Yeah.
So there's not really a question, just also for me, it's a reconfirmation that when you see, it's all a question, also what you just said, about finding the middle path or finding a balance of things. When I see your the examples of direct implementations of rigid geometric systems, they're very hierarchical, which is something which maybe human unity is in conflict with, I don't know. And on the longer run, they most often lead to either they vanish, like in the case of Baghdad, or they get extinct and disappear completely. And for me, it's always when I look again at the galaxy, and I'm always really, is it really something which is God-given, or Roger-given? Is it a 1:1 implementation? Especially when you zoom in, but when I zoom out, it's so intricate, there are so many possibilities. And for me, it's not one of these very rigid systems. It's also not limited to one circle. No, it has this movement which goes in and outside and flows. And that makes it really, so I really wonder I always wonder when this transition happened from that wide open, vast vision to what then a master plan tries to express on a technical level. So we still have to get to terms with that. No, both of them are there. I talked to you about it. For me, what would be really interesting would be to see a bioclimatic study of this galaxy model and see what happens if you have a strong southeastern wind which comes in, and with all these shapes of the lines of forces, what kind of whirlwind we have inside. Is it great? Does it lift us all up? So that would be something which I wish we have a computer model for.
I have a little answer for this. But first, the first part of the question, I mean, if we have an answer for this question that easy, we will not be here, right? It's all will be. But we have to keep trying. You just have to keep, and this is the aim of these kind of lectures to me, is never to elevate, to cancel debates. It's actually to make the debate deeper. And I was always saying, knowledge doesn't make you disagree. It just makes the disagree more tolerable to other opinions or other visions, because you know that it is grounded in something. So yeah, they just continue trying. And I think the beauty of design is that it always can find a space between function and beauty, between climatic and efficiency. And you can we try through design and see, yeah? But the second one, I had a conversation, I had thought about this a lot, and I had a conversation recently with one of the Vastushilpa team, Jaydeep. And he has good experience with this. He's coming from very rigorous place, SOM, in which they were doing lots of simulations. And he said something, and I think is absolutely correct. Because I forgot to put it, but all of my studies in London on the work of Norman Foster, One London, in which all of these geometries are really impacting airflow. So you will find this building, the helmet. The air is very little before. It's like 2 meters per second, 1 meter per second, 0.5 meter per second. Behind it, 5 meters per second, just because the geometry spin the air so much. So we know that from different experience, and I spent almost 3 months with anemometers checking these things. We know that buildings could have enormous, but Deep think, and I think he's correct, mostly not in this case, because the porosity. This works when you are having a situation of curtain glass, for example. Everything is solid, and then there's really turbulence happens. But most of the studies and the thoughts on this would say this is a shade, and then there is a building, another building, another building. So it's more local. There will be a pressure, and then it rotates around. The cases in which could work, I think, if these, for example, parts of these are solid, and they are really up, because this is the upper part, definitely they can be, you can use them. You can use them as wind catchers, that they get the wind from here, bring it down. If you design it in that way, it has to be deliberately designed. You have to be careful with the, of course, I could give some notations of what not to do or what to do, but for example, I think the northwest wind is the one that we call the oven, right? Southwest. So southwest, if it is spinning on the line of goodwill, it's really bad, because that's really hot. But if you have very high porosity, it will infiltrate, right? Here, not much. I would say it is not so bad because the direction of the wind can penetrate. I would just say when you are designing something like this, you really have to make sure that there are enough passages and corridors for the air. But it is, at the end, when I thought about it a lot, and I said, forget about it, go to vernacular modes in which you are creating an intense situation of microclimate, because you have all of these orientations. And we always, when we work in modern, we think orientation. This is the air direction. And I feel like very difficult. There is no one single orientation. Just create rules of density of nature and of buildings that leads to microclimate with porosity that leads to infiltration of air. And I think that could have a chance of working, yeah.
Okay, so I think we have run out of time.
Yeah.
So if you have any more questions, we have some papers
After
there
coffee.
at the back. Please write them down, and we will pass them on to Omar.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, now we have a tea outside waiting, and we will meet back in here at 10:30.
No coffee.
I think there is coffee, I'm not sure. We will meet back in here at 10:30 for Nicole's presentation. All right.
Someday. In the public buildings, having some people having some buildings is good. In public, what are used to today. If you have very good shade, because you're creating microclimate outside, fine. But if you don't have much,
As we get denser, we have less energy.
that means that you need lots of air. Lots of this. The air create pressure, then you can have a situation of density, but with
So slowly.
need regular just lighten the Yes, roofs, I would insulate with double layer.
because too much solar radiation. Then you can give another piece of the going up and up. You can have like a structure where yeah, exactly. No, perfect. Daytime temporary, this is when you need a heavy home. So at least one room in the house is heavy and it's cool. So you can go to it if you're ready.
So basically what we have is we have like
if you have the discipline to open and close it. I don't have I don't have that.
No, but it really works. Our house is like 5 to 6 degrees cooler in the summer than outside.
Yeah, first time I tried to link these two. Yes. Planning
On the cosmological situation or ecological one, the one in history.
I feel it is so real. So you told me in the morning I said I'm looking forward to see it. And I was like, me too. I'm looking forward to this. First time I tried this combination. With climate. That's one of the life has to be
Là, tu vois, regarde, en termes de communication, Fabien, je ne sais pas si tu as suivi ça aussi, mais du coup, on a une catégorie. À côté, ceux qui ont fait du design, et du drawing, and inputs, ceux qui ont des. Except they kind of forgot to tell who is what to them, which now Fabien is in the input section. And he's like, like, yeah, but which? But it's not creating a very nice ambiance. Why are all my posts in Nicole. Alors, maintenant, il faut que je retrouve le pointeur. Alors en fait, comme le récepteur est enlevé, c'est la feuille du bas. Ok. Ça c'est bien.
Donc toi, tu vas être assise là.
Ouais.
Donc si moi je me mets
Ben, je peux bouger aussi, ça me dérange pas. Je vais juste aller chercher un coussin pour être assis.
donc à la fin, tu me donnes, quand tu mets la carte, tu me donnes le nom. Non, parce qu'après, vous êtes merci. En fait, si, ce serait bien un petit verre. On va avoir un bon aussi.
Aditi, you were wonderful. Nicole, je vais te mettre un micro-cravate. Enfin, t'as pas de cravate, mais... comment j'appelle ça si c'est pas un micro-cravate? Ça s'appelle un lavalier. Et du coup, le micro? Le papier. Le micro lavalier. Maman, je te mets là.
Oui.
Ouais.
Voilà.
Alors, je vais clip ça.
Pas besoin de mettre ça.
Je vais planter ça sur le bord du t-shirt. Et après ça, tu mets dans ta poche.
Sophie,
Oui, c'est moi. I'm listening.
did you check on your system if it works, if it opens?
You check.
Open Office or not? It doesn't reformat the PDF file.
No, I checked yesterday it was working. I mean, we can check together to see if it looks like it's supposed to look, but yesterday when I looked
No, it doesn't change the big files embedded in the
So which one? Which one is the good one? The one, no?
The second one.
No, no, but come on.
Yes, I will. Elle m'a dit 45 minutes ou 56. Il n'est pas terminé à 45.
Everyone could slowly start coming back into the room.
Nicole.
It's already on.
Tu as besoin d'une chaise.
Tu veux sur ça? Il n'y a pas besoin de celle-là, c'est ok.
J'y arrive.
Hi, thank you. Okay. Okay, cool. Stefano, we ready?
Yes.
Nicole, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready.
So our next presentation will be by Nicole on urban planning and Oroville economic ideals. Nicole has been living in Oroville since 1980. She served as a socio-economic member of L'Avenir, having been active in trying to give form to Oroville's economic ideals. She co-founded key services such as Nandini and PTDC, worked in the financial service, and has served on both the BCC and FAMC. She has managed the Oroville Visitor Center for over 20 years, helping to define the policy for visitor access to Matrumandir and Oroville. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I don't realize, no? Okay, so I was approached to try and define a little bit better the relationship between the city, between the planning, and the economy of Oroville. We've all heard the presentation that was made by Olivier, which was centered mostly on the prosperity aspect of the economy. But I felt that how does that impact the city? How does that impact the built form? How does that impact the social system in which Oroville is supposed to function? So maybe we can have... So when I was on L'Avenir TDC, Doshi one day asked us this question, but this city, what will it feel like? And we were actually all a bit floored by the question. And this question stayed with me. And when this Dreamweaving exercise revived in the present form, I have been again thinking, what kind of information can we give to try and answer some of that question? So, a city. In current cities, and pretty much all over the world, except for a few pockets now, cities are capitalist cities. Capitalist cities drive on vital enjoyment. They drive on consumption, overconsumption. And that drive is the generator both of wealth, but also of progress. We constantly invent new things. Some of them are perfectly useless, but some of them are extremely useful. So this is the system pretty much all over the world. But here we are in a city that Mother defined, I mean, one of the ways that she defined Orville, she said, the system will be an adaptation of the communist system. And I think we need to try and define a little bit better what we can understand of what she meant. Next. So from the beginning of the 20th century, Mother had these visions of cities. There were a few. She had a few of these visions over the years. It started in the 20s, and then it was this idea to have an ideal city near Hyderabad, and then finally Orville being the last one in that line of visions that she had for a perfect city. Now, these different visions were different in many ways. How were the people going to be housed, what kind of habitat they would have, how it would be organized, which urban to be at the center, how all this was going to be, keeps on changing. Not all of it, but some of it keeps on changing. But one of the things that remains constant is that she sees a city without the exchange of money. Now, what means a city without the exchange of money? What does she mean by that? She means that you don't have a shop you go to and buy your stuff. That's not how it's meant to be. So you have a city in which she has removed that motor of, of exchange. She has removed it. She has said, no money. So how are we going to organize this city without the exchange of money? Because by money, she doesn't just mean the cash you pull out of your pocket, which is what she had in those days, but also all the different aspects that we have today, which is, a virtual exchange of money. So one of the things we can turn to is the way, of course, she organized the ashram. She organized the ashram, and she organized the early Orville, I know that some of you here remember very well, as places where central services, centrally funded services, were actually giving the goods to people. This is her vision of how the city of Orville is to function. It's to function by you give your work, in exchange you receive what you need to cover your basic needs. So basic needs are taken care of so that everybody is free to organize his life, not according to financial means, but according to his inner capacities. Next. So if it's not money that drives the life of the city, that motivates progress and research, what is it going to be? We've heard Peter touch on to that point a few times. I've heard on the radio, no, I wasn't here. It's consciousness. It is really everybody trying all the time to be at the top of his or her consciousness. This is what drives progress. It's a progress towards more consciousness. Mother invokes unending education in the Charter, future realization. So obviously, she sees Orville as a very vibrant place. When earlier we talked about communism, she doesn't see it as a sort of drab place where people will just get what they need in some sort of services that are going to be a little bit tatty, and no, she sees that life, she sees us, she sees Auroville going towards being relevant in the world, going towards something that is going to be a shining beacon. Next. What economic principle foster Auroville's manifestation? Now here we have a little bit of the tricky point that Mother's vision for Auroville evolved over the years. It is only in 1969 and further in 1970 that she says very clearly, no exchange of money in Auroville. Before that, it's, there's a crown, there's guest houses, there's restaurants, there's shops, everybody is happily milling around this crown road. But in 69, she says, no exchange of money. And she develops that vision in 69 and 70. She says there will be no private property, no private businesses, no exchange of money. The basic needs of Aurovillians are to be provided for by the township. Next. What does this mean for the crown? The crown, as we all know, is envisaged as a concentrated corridor of common infrastructure and common services. This has not always been understood, also inside Auroville. It's okay? Yeah. We have had drives towards trying to commercialize parts of the crown, commercialize parts of the city, and several TDCs and FMCs have actually resisted. So far, moderately successfully, but rather successfully, to see the commercialization of this crown and to ensure that a distinct, non-consumerist environment is upheld. So today, in the stretch of ground that we all know, which is Food Link, Solar Kitchen, PTDC, etc., all the way to Arca, we actually have, so far, pretty much upheld this vision. One of the key questions which we all need to think about is how are we going to ensure vibrancy, dynamism, and creativity in these public services and infrastructure environment? How is this going to be really a living space where everybody wants to go and wants to be together and wants to meet? Next. So in the residential zone, we have all these that I've just talked about, including Santé and the Auroville Library. So what can be envisaged in that stretch is more, perhaps smaller scale eateries, perhaps something a little bit more, familier, I don't know how you say in English. Community kitchens, daycare, laundry, hairdressers, etc. All that in a pedestrian and child-friendly environment within very easy reach of the residences. I think that one of the things that one needs to understand is that, and I'm sure you've heard this now many times, this city is a very compact city. When you are at the end, I would say, of the residential zone, on the outer end, you're actually within how many minutes of the Crown Road? 3 minutes, 5 minutes maximum. So anybody can walk that distance. Anybody can actually enjoy, as long as we, one way or the other, create shade, create a pleasant environment that people can actually really give reality to this pedestrian city. Next. cultural zone, we have Kalabumi, we have the arts and music studio, we have schools. And yeah, this cultural zone, I thought it was very interesting when Anupama presented. When she actually explained very well that both the cultural zone and the industrial zone are inward-looking zones. They are zones to develop, the cultural zone is a zone to develop the culture of Orville, to grow our own culture. And the industrial zone is the zone where we go to work. It is not a zone where we employ a lot of employees in order to produce things. No. It is the place where we go to work. And why is that important? It's again that aspect of consciousness. We are supposed to work and produce for each other's because, again, of that aspect of consciousness, we are meant to pour consciousness in what we do, in what we try to manifest. And that creates a value that is transmitted in what we pass on to the next person. So we support each other in this adventure of consciousness by our concentration on that aspect. Next. Then industrial zone, the vocational training, co-working space for Orvillians. Next. Coming to this international zone, again, coming back to what Anupama was saying, she was saying the international zone is the zone that looks outward. It's the zone that actually lets in all these innovations and ideas from the outside world and brings them in. And we are then able to mingle with that and go further. This international international zone portion of the Crown in the early days, and I think still perhaps in the latest master plan, is a place where you have, apart from institutions like Savitri Bhavan, Unity Pavilion and others, and the Language Lab, you have also guest houses, which makes absolute sense in an international zone. But again, I think we need to ask ourselves the question. People who are coming to Orville are coming to experience a different type of life. They are not necessarily coming to do what, in a way, they're pushed to do today, which is to consume one way or the other, or to be frustrated by the fact that they cannot access things. So I think that we need in our thinking, when we envisage guest houses and such places on the Crown Road of the international zone, that we also keep in mind that the people who come, who are going to stay in there, we need to absorb them into the Orville way of living and not try to cater to their needs in the way that they are catered for outside. Then, okay, on the practical level, we have these two parks at each end. We have parks between each of the zones, no? So how to integrate that? I mean, now it's one of the hot topics at present. So how do we blend the existence of these parks with the rest of the city? I very much appreciated what Omar said when he said that from his experience, the green belts have worked when actually they have fingers that go inside the city and that are allowed to create corridors for that environment to flourish. Next. So, if we have this perfect city, when we have this perfect city, we have each and every one of us going about their work in the industrial zone or otherwise, or in the cultural zone. We have the crown where we go and get our foods in community kitchens, in PTDCs or whatever. We have that distribution system that takes care of our needs. Mother was very clear. I mean, she faced it also in the ashram. You need a little bit of an extra something for each and every one of us. It's not that some of us may be able to live constantly in a space that is organized on these lines, but many of us will have extra needs. The city will not be able to provide everything that we need. This she also foresees. She foresees that this industrial zone, economic zone, she calls it, is not going to be able to provide everything that we need. So we need a zone of shops. We need a zone of shops for the extras and for the things that we cannot produce. So it's at the same time, the possibility for people in Oroville to go out, to be in a different, access different goods. So, this zone of shops, we all know it. I mean, it's there in the very basic of what Mother explains about the city. So, but we have not defined where that is going to be. It's been envisaged, Mother said it should be at the edge of the city, but where, we don't know. And to my mind, if today we look at the Crown Road and we try to be true to what Mother wanted for this Crown Road, we also need to look at this aspect and to see where that is actually going to land, how it is going to manifest, and what it is going to look like. And it's very important because, all of us, the moment we want to go to a restaurant, go a little bit to a shop or something, where do we find ourselves? In Kuilapalayam or in Pondicherry. Neither of experiences is actually conducive to keeping your level of consciousness, and neither experience is actually being uplifting in any way. So we need to see, okay, what is it that we are going to need, and where are we going to have it? Next. Oh yeah, I forgot. In the same way that this South Service Zone is thought of for a place for the municipal services like electrical service and all these things. So we have defined more or less that aspect, but the zone of shop has not been developed. It was also there in the presentation that was done by Helmut about Billinger. Billinger also talks about that. At one point, he says, Billinger also, in this study for the mobility, he also talks about the importance of having something somewhere on the edge. So on the edge, on the ring road, what are we talking about here? Because we have to be a little bit, I don't know, I felt, this is just me, but I felt that it needs to be emphasized that in the galaxy plan that we increasingly refer to, and that I see increasingly a sort of adherence towards, there is no ring road. The city's fingers go into the green belt, and the green belt merges with the city. This is actually what's happening in that plan. Similarly, the crown, sorry, I'll have to say that, but similarly, the crown, I mean, you look at the galaxy model, there is no perfect circle on the galaxy model. Because the galaxy is a spiral galaxy. It's not, you have different types of galaxy. This galaxy is what you call a spiral galaxy. Now, a spiral is by definition something that is not in nature, that is not going to create a perfect form. But that's an aside. So, one has to reflect on the desirability or otherwise of this outer ring road, which has advantages for mobility and for access, but is also a divider between the city and the green belt. Mobility and access, what mobility, what access to the city? I think this is perhaps not strictly for this dreamweaving, which I understand is more for the crown, but it's super important. It's super important. It actually defines pretty much everything that we are going to do. Next. So, now you've heard in the little presentation that Aditi made, it's 20 years I've been managing the visitor center of Oroville. Means I find myself daily confronted with a reality, an objective outside reality that is growing in terms of mobility, in terms of numbers, in terms of expectation, that is also shifting in many ways and in many interesting ways, but I'm faced with that. And I'm also faced, like we all are, with this extremely rapid, I mean, I don't know, I don't go to Krilapalayam often, but every time I go down nowadays, it's one or two more restaurants or shops or buildings that are popping up. I mean, it's like spreading at a pace that is very frightening, which is why, sorry, I'll have that smaller slide also, which is why I think it's extremely important that the definition of what happens alongside the roads, the tar roads, on land that is owned by Oroville is really very strictly defined. It is defined, but it is not defined strictly enough. So, I mean, I've been on TDC, I know what it is. You get these pressures, you get these people, it's 20 times, they've come, you don't know anymore what to do. You say, okay, let's try and do this. Which generally ends up, I mean, you know very well, generally ends up in disaster, because actually, because we don't have a place for everything. In this, please understand, in this master plan, we don't have a place for everything. And that's why I'm saying that this zone of shops or this zone of, I don't know, studios where the Oroville units can also exhibit their things is important to have. If we don't have that, we will constantly have this pressure of people wanting to go inside Oroville, to go to the magnets of interest that are there in our industrial zones or elsewhere. So we need to create something in a planned environment, in a beautiful environment, that people will be able to feel something of the quality of Oroville when they come here. Yeah, showroom in the industrial zone, raise mobility, accessibility issues, etc. So, next. So, visitor center, we come back to that. So, visitor center is inside the city, not far from the nominal ring road. It actually touches the nominal ring road at the bottom of the visitor center plot. It has limited space, and its chief raison d'être is not to sell Oroville products. Its chief raison d'être is to explain what Oroville is about. Because of the objective reality, financial reality that Oroville has been in over the years, we had to blend this thing. This happened before I got on the scene, on the scene of the visitor center. We had to blend these things. Commercial units support the side that is the side that gives knowledge and services to the visitors. It's getting way too small now. It's getting way too small. The requests from Orville units to have a place to show what they are doing is constant. It has gone down a little bit with COVID, but I tell you, it's about to start with a vengeance, and so is the number of people coming to Orville. The moment this COVID is over, I tell you, it's just going to flare up. And it's going to flare up not in the way in which it used to be. 50 people in a bus. No, no, no. 2-3 people in big SUVs. That's what's happening today. So we need to, sorry, I'm taking way too long and I'm off topic and whatever, but I think it's important that we think about these things when we talk about mobility and other things. No? I wish that with the present configuration where we have the representatives from both the Tamil Nadu and the Pondicherry government, when we actually have very high-ranking officers on our governing board, that we could take the opportunity to organize buses that come from Pondicherry to come to Orville. Because otherwise, I tell you, we are not going, I see Fabien nodding his head, we actually, our roads, our access roads are simply not meant for that. And I'm not saying that we should welcome everybody that comes. But what I'm saying is that whatever we do, we have to plan to do it in a more organized way, in a quieter way for people, in a way that kind of brings them into a different space when they arrive in Orville. Okay. I'm good. I'm actually, yeah. So, yeah. So currently, all these people that come, roughly 800,000 in non-COVID years. Yeah, they come through the narrow streets of Ida and Chaveli. So that means they're actually going down a very small road that was repaired by the collector not that many years ago, which is now again totally destroyed because of water, because of passage. It comes in front of the temple, it comes in front of the school, and it goes through a street, I'm not kidding, it's about 2.5 meters wide, and you can't make it wider because people have built their houses on the Perambouclat. So we are at bottleneck there, and this bottleneck means that on busy days, when we have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, sometimes 8,000 people coming on big weekends where everybody's on holiday and doesn't have a festival to attend at home. On those days, you don't pass. Even on a bicycle, you don't pass anymore. This is the reality. So why? Because everything gets clogged, everything gets blocked. So this is not the way to come into Auroville. We have to find ways to raise the bar and to raise that bar on our own terms. Yeah. So therefore, there is a pressing need to have a different, better managed access for visitors coming to Orville and currently coming to the visitor center. Now, I'm not saying that this visitor center has to stay there for all eternity. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have short-term, medium-term, and long-terms in planning and in life. So now we are in the short-term, and most probably, the way I've seen things in Orville developing, we're certainly in the medium-term as well. So I know about ideas to, extrapolate and put things in different places. I've been on these places with Luigi and with other people and trying to give a reality to it. Has not happened. So for the moment, we have an objective reality. We have the visitor center where it is, and We need spaces for our units, and not only for our units, also for the research aspects of Auroville, to showcase themselves to the public so that people have a better idea what Auroville stands for, what Auroville is doing, what Auroville is striving for. So, next. So, Fabien will smile again. This is a little bit of my data, but it's something that I came up with 4 years ago when actually I did realize that the lands that we needed in order to make the stretch of ring road between Eurovelo-Cria and the visitor center parking, we actually had both them. That we actually can pass through. So for me, it's always this thing, then why don't we do that? So I know, maybe we show that thingy, that map. Tu me donnes le glis-glis? Merci. So, this black thing is the road that comes from Certitude Corner and goes into Eda and Chavadi. This is Eda and Chavadi village. So what the road does, it does this, it goes down here in front of the temple, it comes back up here, and people come into the parking. So what has been happening is that now we have, as you see, not perfect, because we still have pieces of private land, quite a few, 6 pieces of private land, that actually impact the ring road. But we have, just above it, a perfectly free space of green, means Auroville land owned by the Auroville Foundation, that is here. So I just wanted to point that out because I think we need to move on this. I think that blending these two things of creating a space alongside some approximation of ring road, which we need on that side, would be a desirable thing to do. And perhaps more what I'm saying is that I felt a little bit alone with that idea. And if it could be taken by some form of dream weaving and by people who have an experience of planning, I think that could be interesting because we need to think about these things. You could very easily have a parking, and this would become a pedestrian boulevard that people would go on. I hear about mobility and how are we going to basically come closer to our ideals of a city with no cars, as much as possible a pedestrian, cycling city. How are we going to do that? How are we going to avoid the mingling of types of transport? It's a question of political will. It's simply a question of political will. The moment we will be sufficient number of people who will want that, or the moment when we will have somebody sufficiently determined who is going to emerge, this is going to happen. Next. Ça marche plus? Aïe, sorry.
You sure there is next?
Yes. So one way to address some of our pressing needs could be, I'm not pushing this idea, I'm here to present something, could be to blend this zone of shops that Mother talks about with the need for Aurovillians to have a space where they can access the goods that they don't get distributed in the city, and blend it with the need for visitors to experience more of what Auroville has to offer. We said that already. So one idea would be, pedestrian boulevard made accessible to visitors via parking and a tramway that showcases Auroville units and projects. This would also help the visitor center to become more of a space simply dedicated for service sector, information sector, showing more of what is happening on the non-commercial aspect of Oregon. Next. So yeah, this is just coming back to the points that we have seen: the need for a commercial downtown, the need to own our managed access for visitor. That this one idea could be to blend these two into this stretch of this approximation of the Outer Ring Road. Yeah, and then as I said, we're not. I think it was, this morning I was listening to Lata's presentation when she says that, you have a master plan for 20 years, and then you have a development plan for 5 years, and then you have actually an annual plan, and everything that you learn in your annual plan in terms of things that have moved inform your development plan and inform your master plan. So in 40, 50 years, in 20 years, in 15 years, I mean, none of us knows. We may have different needs. We can move this visitor center more outside. But then we can use the infrastructure that will have been created for different use. We can use this infrastructure for more housing, whatever it is that we feel like doing. Voila. Anything else? So this is just the fact that we need a place for everything. When I was saying that we are not, you see, in the master plan, in the galaxy also, we are not really, not everything, and of course, how could it, has been foreseen. So we need to find a place for these different activities. Voila. Is that the end? Or there's one more? It's the end. Voila. Good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you very much to David and to Omar and to the organizers for giving me a space to express this. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Nicole. So we have some time for questions. Again, David will take the names so we don't get mixed up. So any questions?
Just a comment. I learned a lot more about this whole topics beyond the purely economical side. And you are mentioning the stretch behind Etienne Chavadi, which is in my mind since 20 years and obvious to do. And you are talking about the political will for that, because of course there will be, as everywhere, when you have to change something, there will be problems. But I remember 3 years ago in that workshop, this stretch was one of the play field in that round table exercise, which was very small as it looked like and unimportant. It was a fantastic, I found, an exercise to join these different aspects of information, economics, and interface with the villages without making walls and all the rest, and liberate the inner traffic by making the outer ring road somehow functional already on that western side. More not to say at the moment.
Non, c'est bon. C'est juste un commentaire, donc I took it in that way.
So thank you very much, Nicole. Maybe it's also a comment. We had also 2 weeks ago a little bit touch upon this part. What I miss is the answer or the interaction with the villager, with Kulapalayam and Etienne Chavadi. I think what we saw 2 weeks ago was about the traffic jam in Kulapalayam.
In this exercise, you mean?
Yes, in this exercise. The regular traffic jam in Kulapalayam. And it's obviously for me the next. I mean, we need to solve this question. What was the tentative of discussion, exchange, work
Recording
together
in progress.
with Kula Palayam and Dayan Shavedi? Since 20 years that it was a question. Can you tell us anything or?
No, not really. I mean, you see, you have two different realities. You have the reality. Anybody corrects me if I'm going to say something wrong here. But what I remember from Kula Palayam when we came, those 40 years ago, Kula Palayam is between the road and Putus. I mean, you have these two little temples, and then you have the pond, and then you have the village around it. That's the village. What we call the village of Kula Palayam is what has developed alongside the road, which is actually a lot of external concerns that have come. It's a lot of Kashmiri shops and other shops. So it's a kind of strip development, is that what you call it? A strip development along the road. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect the life of the village, but in a way, I would say that Kula Palayam is much more fortunate in that sense, that they still have their village, they have their temple, they have their streets, they have all that. That's actually not impacted by the madness that's happening on the roads when, again, there is a really big weekend. So, Dayan Shavedi is, the road goes through it. So it is a difficult thing. So what we are at the visitor center at the receiving end of is the fact that people are upset. Villagers are upset about that state of affair. Of course, some people benefit from it, but a lot of people are actually saying, enough is enough. So we need to find a solution. And I find that when we have the solution ourselves, in terms of land, and following roughly what our plan is anyway supposed to be, I'm hoping for people coming together and really looking at the validity. I'm not saying this is valid, this is what we have to do. I would love people to look at the validity of it and help, if it's valid, to help to bring it forward.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Thanks so much. Always nice to see, the passion behind people. And every time people present, I think this is it. This is what we have to deal with first, Because they make so much sense. Yeah. I have a comment and a question. The comment is that you remember that with Dream Catchers, we have done a short, medium, and long-term. Yes. So, and yes. I think Murray was involved in it quite a lot, and David, and all of us. So there we brought I think so, but I think you were already working on it, we brought the parking already out. You remember what that mess was before?
Yes.
Buses still Matra Mandir,
yes.
And now we've achieved that.
Yes.
The next part was to take visitor center to where the SLI was, where Kalia has given his land now to Oroville. And we had even walked that path, and we had said, why not take that walk?
Yes.
And people walk exactly, it's 10 minutes from there to visitor center. Then visitor center is more educational, research oriented, and then you go 10 minutes to Matra Mandir. So I was wondering if that's still in your consciousness somewhere, and why wait, 30, 40 years, forget it. We have to do it as soon as we can, because 8 lakhs a year, it's not going to get less, as you said. We're not going to manage another even 5 years. We're going to be bursting. So maybe that's...
We'll have to make choices.
Yeah, what we can do. I mean, I know it's a big investment, but like you said, if there's political will and, and maybe there is money to... And then we can design something which is more... Because like Swaram, people want to come to Swaram because they want to see how it's made. Every time people say, I want to see how paper is made in Oroville. You can't send them to Oroville paper, right? They love the paper, but they also want to see how it's made. So how can we kind of bring that maybe through videos or some way of doing workshops, I don't know. But next visitor center can be different because we've learned everything along the way. So that's the comment. The question is, so you said industrial zone and residential zone are inward looking. Cultural zone and industrial zone are inward looking, and residential is residential, and international is more of a face to the world.
Yes, international, yes.
I find one, I would like just a question in my mind.
Yeah.
When you look at the model, the international zone is the most sparse aspect,
Yes,
it's very sparse, right?
Yes.
So if you want that to become the face to the world, and when we see 8 lakhs today, and we're going to just get more, and when we are 50,000, it somehow doesn't sit in the mind, like how that's going to be our face to the world when it is so sparse, and it's, like, it's more like a park with some buildings in it, So we don't want to have all those guest houses there, and all these. So it's still a question in my mind. Whereas industrial zone is so dense. I mean, we have all these 5 or 6 lines of force, 18 stories, And how is that? It's not kind of sitting. Okay, guest houses. I don't know. I mean, we need to also invite people, right? I mean, to experience Auroville life. It's not just one-day visitors. We want people who want to stay a little bit, experience 2-3 months maybe, work. So there is some dichotomy there, which I'm not, maybe you can throw some light on that. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, no, the only thing that I can say to that is that, you see, from what I understand, what happens inside Auroville is concentrated. So, as you say, people who will come to the international zone to stay, to research, to share, to take part in seminars or workshops, or so those people are the people that will eventually be very much welcome, I believe, in the international zone. When we talk about day visitors, we talk about something very different. And what I know of the international zone is that they've always said, no, we are not there for that, and rightly so. So I think that the two are different in terms of the type of people that are to be welcome, either as day visitors or as researchers. I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm worried about the density in terms of planning, building.
Yeah, that I'm not really. It's not my area of expertise at all. Voilà.
Are there any more questions? Okay, so then I think that's it. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And so we will now move into the next part of our 2 days, which is kind of the beginning of the Dreamweaving. And with that, I will hand over to David.
Okay, so as I think we tried to explain a little bit at the very beginning today, we're in a transition from the sort of workshops from 2 weeks ago where we were introducing the aspects that need to be integrated into the Dreamweaving, and we're moving now more fully into the Dreamweaving. The architects are either hard at work or sitting here today listening to the last couple of presentations, which have been part of this transition. And one of the things now, it's very important to explain that the Dreamweavings that we've done before in the past were all fully internal. None of it was presented to the outer community and so forth until something was finished. So it's actually a very new thing for us to be exploring how to bring this to the community. Now, when we first started to plan this weekend was going to be also fully open, including peer review, advisory group review, etc., etc. And it was in the flow of this process, in this sort of exploratory phase, that we realized it's better actually for the architects who've in many cases never worked with each other to get a sense of how each of them are working and to give them a safer space to share. So we decided to just have the architects today and to do the full peer reviews and so forth in 2 weeks' time.
One of the things we then didn't do is think through that and realize with the live streaming that that's a bit confusing. So we did make the decision yesterday to not do the live streaming from here on for the sharing for the architects, so that they get a bit more comfortable with each other. But it will be fully live streamed in 2 weeks' time. And Serena and her team are filming. And so anyway, this will all be recorded, both for architects who couldn't make it, but also in the end, we will have these presentations from the architects available in the long term. They will be there. They'll be recorded. Another thing that emerged, we had an initial sharing session a week ago on Saturday, which was not Dreamweaving. It was simply each of the architects being able to show what they're coming up with, so everybody gets a taste, a flavor of what everybody's looking at. And so from there, it also has become clear that there's a sort of distinction to be made between people coming with an input, which is kind of like, almost like a design extension of dream catching. So we had, Mona mentioned, we'd had a dream catching session just to give everybody a taste of that, where you sit in a circle and you share verbal ideas that are coming up over a couple of hours. Now we've kind of moved into a design phase, and so there are actually inputs coming from that design perspective, but they're not yet reached the point where they're going to be actually woven. Like, some people might take that idea and weave it into their own design, but some people might not feel ready to yet be taking the inputs from other people and weaving them into their design. So we've distinguished between inputs and outputs. So now, before lunch, we'll have 3 presentations which are input focused, which may well evolve into outputs in a couple of weeks' time. That's up to the people themselves to decide if they want to do that. And then after lunch, we're going to have the first 2 full Dreamweaving sessions after lunch, and then tomorrow will be everybody else. So we have 9 in total, I believe. So there'll be 2 this afternoon, 7 tomorrow. So if I could invite Fabian to... Yeah, is that okay? So Fabian will make the first of the input presentations now. Yes. Yes, 20. So we have 1 hour now between now and lunch, and so each person has 20 minutes to present something. And if we finish a bit early, we get an early lunch. Yes, Marie. They watch. Yeah, they're on Zoom. They can. Yeah. I should have mentioned that. Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, this is not feedback. This is just an input for people to take on board if they wish and move on with in their designs in the next few weeks.